Welcome to the Sellosophy podcast. Now, why do we call it Sellosophy? Because it's the combination of the word sales and philosophy. Today, I'm excited to welcome a very special guest. His name is Jonathan Stark. And Jonathan is a former software developer and an author of a book called Hourly Billing is Nuts, a host of several podcasts, one called Ditching Hourly, and he's a co-host of one called The Business of Authority. Today's episode is actually going to be called Building Authority. So we'll talk a lot about that, and we'll tap into Jonathan's expertise and knowledge in that space. But he spends his time now teaching self-employed professionals how to increase their income without having to work more hours. And Jonathan and I we may have not talked about this, but I'm actually a musician myself.
Oh, cool.
Would love to learn what I saw that you went to school for it, and I wonder what instruments you play. I play guitar. I'm a composer, but you live in Rhode Island, but you've lived in New York, Miami, Boston, Atlanta, Milan. So you have an incredible experience traveling the world, and you have a beautiful family as well, and now live in Rhode Island. So welcome, sir.
Yes, that's right. Well,
Anything you would add about that intro?
No, that was great. Love it. Makes me sound better than I am, maybe. but to answer your question, I was a songwriting major, and my main instrument at Berkeley was guitar, but mostly I was more interested in the songwriting part of it.
Amazing. I'm a songwriter as well, but I'm a natural songwriter. So I picked up the guitar, and just through the ear, I learned how to play. I know how to read tabs, but not actual music, but like the tabs for dummies. And I got into songwriting when I was like 15. I wrote in Spanish and in English, and I have like over, 60, 70 songs written, kind of all for me. And every once in a while, I dabble into the composing stuff. So it's a beautiful, pastime to just get the creative juices flowing. And I hope to take that into my business as well. Some of that different type of thinking helps me really look at how to look at business as well, which I'm sure you apply that into yours.
Oh yeah, it activates a totally different part of your brain, which is nice break.
Yeah, so I would love to dig right in. I know that one of your podcast name is The Business of Authority, and you co-host that with Rochelle Moulton. And you all spend a lot of time sharing a lot of insights for solopreneurs or small firm owners, or those who are kind of in the six-figure space and try to like help them level up to that 7-figure space. And a lot of it's around just building authority and what authority means. So I want to just kind of open that up, since what do you see in your space? Because you spend a lot of time coaching and developing maybe solopreneurs that are starting to be an expert at something, technical expert of some sort. And then maybe they plateau in that craft and don't know how to get themselves out of that hole. So I'd love to kick it off with that.
Sure. Yeah, I would say, well, I think there are two main things where when people come to me, they're plateaued for one of two big reasons. One is that they're billing by the hour and they can't get ahead. Like the more they work, the more they make, but what they really want is their time back. And they see no way to do that without taking a hit on their income, making less money. So that can create an income plateau at, depending on what industry you're in. A lot of times I talk to people and it's around 150, 200, 250,000, where they're working as much as they can. They're being as billable as they can. They're staying as busy as they can. But they just can't break through that ceiling, of course, because there aren't more hours in the day. So if they really don't have any options, well, they do have options, and that's what I teach them, but they don't see any options other than the really common one, which is hiring a bunch of people. So if that can work, if people do want to scale up by adding headcount, it certainly works. There's tons of examples of that. The thing that bums me out is when people do that because they think it's their only option, and they're really not cut out to be a boss. I'm not cut out to be a boss. I'm not good with the pressure, the leading employees. It's just not how I want to spend my time. So I was fortunate years ago to discover something called value pricing, which allowed me to level up in a different way. So I'm sure we'll talk about that more. But to answer your question, the first big thing is that their business model is just got an artificial ceiling on their income because they're trading time for money. The other thing that I see will plateau people, or cause a plateau in someone's career, is that they if they're doing any marketing at all, it's by accident, and they're mostly just getting referrals, and
Right.
they're not getting enough of them to have more demand than capacity. So what ends up happening is every lead they get is like, I need to land this because I haven't gotten a lead in 3 months. And so it just sets the wrong frame. It takes away all their leverage in the sales cycle. What you really want is more demand than supply for whatever it is that you are selling. And that will allow you to increase your fees over time, as long as you're not trading time for money. So those two things go hand in hand a little bit. But assuming that you have ditched hourly billing and you're doing some kind of fixed pricing, there's different ways to do that. Then you need to increase the demand, and then you can sort of increase your income. And then once you increase your income, then it's easier to have a bigger impact and focus on more important things, and not just busy work and, working with clients who maybe aren't the greatest fit.
Yeah, and since you and I are in a similar space that we do coach folks in to help them level up sales using different strategies, one of the pain points that I get mostly is people are just so used to referral business, but when referral business slows down, they don't know what to do next. Like, what kind of sales activities do they engage in to create that demand? So would you mind sharing if there were one or two things someone can immediately start focusing on that would give them a higher level of return or help them increase that demand for business from non-referral business? What would be a couple things?
I mean, it depends on how aggressive you want to be, how bad your cash flow situation is. So let's assume it's worst case scenario, and you really don't know where your mortgage is coming from next month or whatever. Then outreach, right? So you can go direct outreach by sending handwritten snail mail letters to people in your ideal target market, and asking them to introduce yourself and say, I help people like you in these particular ways. Would you be willing to jump on a phone call to see if there's a fit? You could do that over email. You could do it over DMs and LinkedIn. That's pretty aggressive. I don't usually work with people who feel the need to do that. A lot of people I work with are software developers, and the idea of spamming people with desperate requests for business turns them off, and perhaps rightly so. But that's when things are bad. Things are bad. You got to do what you got to do. So that's something you could do. Even cold call. I've interviewed people who just smile and dial, and it works. It can work. It doesn't. The problem with it is you have to be very careful for it to not put you in the wrong light, because for someone who's trying to position themselves as an expert or an authority, and you appear not to be in demand, it's not a great look. So it is a little bit of a minefield in terms of doing it in a way that doesn't undermine your credibility, but it can be something. Something that I often recommend that I think is a little less dangerous in that regard is finding a watering hole where ideal buyers hang out online, and dropping what I call answer bombs in the watering hole. So if you help CPAs or something like that, you would want to find a place, ideally online, where they are spending time talking shop, and search in there for things like, does anybody, or help with, or emotionally charged language like nightmare, dream, crazy, things where they're expressing emotions and asking for help. And look for things that you're uniquely qualified to just knock out of the park, and just tell them, write like a 1,500 word post of things they could consider, or diagnose the situation, help them get clarity on it. But that can be very effective.
It's really interesting you mentioned that. One of the programs that you offer, it's an asynchronous approach to sort of build out your business model. And I signed up to it. The pricing seminar is called, which I'll leave in the show notes. And one of the lessons was, hanging out in these watering holes and dropping these answer bombs. I accidentally did this before I was in your program, but then I understood, I was able to put a label and a definition on it, and I realized the effect that it had on me getting business. And I'll give you just a quick example of what it was. I became certified to help automate workflows for tax practices. It's a software called TaxDomes. I also love sales technology and how to drive sales using technology, specifically software. And there is a community Facebook group, and it has 2,000 plus members. I may even think even more than that. And I joined it genuinely to learn more about like what are the pain points, what are the features, what are the things that they're hurting the most. So as a certified consultant, I can just learn how to equip myself to be more knowledgeable of resources and the answers that other people are sharing. And little by little, as I gained more expertise, I started being the one, sending a quick Loom video showing people how to do something really quick, or a hyperlink to a YouTube video that I started when I started getting into content creation. And I asked permission from the admin, hey, do you mind if I do this so it doesn't seem like I'm trying to sell anything? I just really want to be like a group expert or something. Long story short, I ended up getting a few private Facebook messages saying, hey, could you implement, for my firm? And I started realizing, when I do see some of this pain language, etc., I started then private messaging a few folks, very soft approach. Hey, here's an invitation, complimentary diagnostic. Let's talk about it. And I started noticing that my close ratios, which were way higher, and it was just so much easier than like going on LinkedIn and DMing someone, hey, you look like you can be in my network. And then like, hey, I'd love to, and to your point, like your authority, the view, like your brand is totally different. So love that best practice. And since I saw that lesson, I started being more intentional now that I knew what it meant to actually join other groups to like where they hang out, right? Like actual accountants that speak about other things, and just gain knowledge also so that I could be a better advisor and coach for them, but also just be there available if they need me. And at least I'm there, right? I'm in their universe. I'm in their target area. So if ever they need me, I could help them.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, I love it.
So I want to transition into, this is a phrase that I kind of stole this from something else I was watching in content. It was a guy who has a t-shirt that says podcasts suck. And then in like the bottom, there's a parenthesis that says, if you don't know how to launch them the right way. And it was kind of catchy. And I started like digging into what he meant by that. And so he's kind of like a podcast advisor. So I was like, but I love the it sucks thing, because it's like, it's just such a common way to say it. And so I thought of the phrase free consulting sucks, which is what I think a lot of professionals who are either in the space for quite some time and don't realize the impact of marketing yourself as someone who gives away their time for free, or they're thinking for free. And you talk a lot about productizing services. So I guess I want to ask you kind of a two-part question. Why do professionals struggle with letting go of that free discovery call? And then the second point is, I guess, what is the negative impact of maintaining that business model?
Okay. Bunch of fun things there. So the first one, I think I would differentiate between free consulting and giving away your thinking for free. So, you used the word time in there, giving away your time for free. So that's another component of this. I think that it is critical to your overall business success, growth, differentiation, and building your authority in the first place to share your thinking for free at scale, like share it constantly. But you're not sharing the application of your thinking. You're sharing the concepts and the insights and the frameworks, maybe even templates and checklists and all of this stuff. This can all be free, and I think it should be, because there are 8 billion people in the world who are not aware of you or who you can help or how you can help them. And I think it's great to lead with generosity, a posture of service, that kind of thing. So it's sort of like the next stage. If you're doing answer bombs and watering holes for a while, the next stage is maybe taking some of that stuff that was helpful to this kind of person and share it on YouTube or publicly, or share it in a mailing list, or share it on a podcast. So I think sharing your thinking for a consultant type, any kind of expertise-based business, self-employed professionals, share as much as you possibly can. Give it all away. Give away your best thinking, but not the application of it, not your time, and not the application of your thinking, which is what you're talking about, I think, in these kind of sales calls where you get a lead, there's some interest. Yes, let's jump on a call. and they want you to apply your thinking in that meeting. I would not do that. I'm not against having sales interviews. I'm not against that, especially if you're doing big ticket projects that are starting in the low six figures. It's probably necessary to jump on the phone with someone before they write you a check that big. But in that meeting, that meeting should be very diagnostic, because it's going to lead to, in this scenario, it's going to lead to a value priced proposal, which requires that you understand the value of these people doing this thing that they think they want to do right now with you. So if you can get those questions answered, then you have a basis for potentially a very profitable project proposal, profitable for you and for them. So it's very difficult to do value pricing without talking to someone. I'd say it's not even really feasible. You need to talk to ideally the buyer, the economic buyer, maybe the owner, the founder, the CEO, and understand why they would want to do this, why they want to do it now, why they want to hire someone expensive like you, and get those answers. You're not really, they might find the kinds of insights that they're going to get from a conversation like that are mostly all going to be self-discovery in nature. So they'll say, like, a good client, a good prospect will, you start asking the why conversation questions, they'll sit back and think like, oh, I never thought about that. Like, oh, maybe we should have some success metrics. Maybe we should think about, what this could mean for the company to help decide how much we should invest in this kind of thing. Like, they might be flying off of a recommendation from their brother-in-law. They might just be going on gut instinct, and it may be good advice or good gut instinct, or maybe not so good. So kind of having them take a step back and rethink their self-diagnosis, their self-prescription, their self-prescribed therapy, giving them a second to step back and think about it can lead to some pretty big insights on their part, to me, that's not like you consulting. It's a consultative sale perhaps, but it's not you solving their problem for them. It's you helping them get clarity about whether or not this is the right thing to do at all. Is this the right approach, or is there a cheaper, faster way to do this that maybe doesn't involve me, or maybe does?
Right.
So
I think you explained it really nicely, and by breaking it down into, sometimes it is important to give away your thinking in the form of maybe frameworks, concepts, content, which is a good way. It's, in essence, content marketing. It's a way for you to elevate your brand, establish authority. So I think that's a good way to differentiate that. Sometimes giving away your thinking is a first step in the sales funnel for someone to know that you exist, that you have an authority and knowledge around something.
mm-hmm.
I think the second thing that I took away from it is that it's probably depends, because maybe the way that I frame it is for folks who have, let's say, a productized service, which could be a 1 hour consultation that requires application of some technical knowledge around a software or some actual specific knowledge around a topic. Let's just use an accountant or a bookkeeper, right? Like, my QuickBooks is broken, I need to get it fixed. How do I create a custom report on my QuickBooks? Well, some of that stuff might take time. You ask some questions, like you said, do some diagnosis, like, what are you trying to achieve with this? And help the client really reframe maybe their self-diagnosis into what they really need, which is a deeper and bigger, type of engagement. But I agree 100%. If you've got a fairly large ticket item, oftentimes taking that sales call would be worth the investment, because the outcome would be mutually beneficial both to the prospect and to the consultant,
Mm-hmm.
especially if it's a profitable endeavor. And I guess my personal philosophy of that is, if it's coming from the internet, like just from the website, not in any way referred to me, I have stopped publishing free 15-minute discovery calls on my website. I do have a paywall. It's a small paywall, and with a description, because what I have found is when I did it, a lot of people didn't show up to it, so they didn't respect my time. But when I put the actual paywall, it's like $50 for 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I let them know that if they end up engaging with me in something, I would apply that credit towards something bigger. But what it did, it stopped the volume of those folks who kind of just, use this free 15 minutes as something they can cancel. It's not important to them because they have no actual investment into it. So just wondering if you have any thoughts around that idea.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. One that's related, but not exactly what you're talking about, is that if you do have a lot of free content out there, then it kind of, the place I don't want people to operate is cheap. I'd rather have you do stuff for free than do stuff for cheap, because doing stuff for free indicates it presents like it presents as successful. Like, I've got time to do this stuff for free. I've got time to write a daily email. I've got time to do 6 podcasts a week. So I must be doing something right? So it kind of impresses upon people that I'm not heads down doing client work. So I'm sort of, walking the walk, right? So if someone wanted, for example, like, I would never have a phone call, for free phone call with someone to maybe see if they're a good fit for a paid phone call, right? Like that doesn't make sense. But for a huge engagement, like I said, it probably is going to be a requirement. But there is some interesting middle grounds that I've found over the years. Something that works for me is when someone can't afford a coaching call, maybe it's, they're from another country where the buying power is just completely different, or whatever the reason is. But I do think I can help them. Then I'll offer kind of a trade where I'll do a free coaching call with them for my podcast. So someone can come on and do a normal coaching call just the way I normally would, but they don't have to pay for it, because what I'm getting in exchange is 2,000 people are hearing what it would be like if they bought a private one-on-one call from me. So it becomes a powerful, a persuasive marketing piece if the person who can't afford the paid version, if they're okay sort of airing their dirty laundry in public. That's the trade-off. It's like, if you want to have a private phone call, that costs money. If you want to have a public phone call, that's good for me, because it shows what it would be like to work with me in this capacity. And it's probably also helpful to a whole bunch of people who are in this person's situation. So I think it's kind of a win-win-win for everybody. Am I giving away consulting? Yes, but I'm getting something in return.
Yeah. So finding some strategic ways to make it, make it a win-win on both ends, without obviously always having to charge every time.
But your specific question about, sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So your specific question was around like lead qualification. I don't know if that was the nature of the question, but that was the thing that jumped out at me.
Yeah, some of it was if you publish giving time for free, there's a negative risk of having folks schedule time on your calendar and then not showing up.
Right.
So that could impact your time.
So an optimization, you did a perfect optimization, which is add some friction to the process of entering a conversation with you. In your case, it was money, but you could do other things. You could have them fill out a really long form, for example, and jump through hoops if you want to increase the friction because of the exact thing you experienced, was that people were wasting your time, tire kickers, people ghosting you. I think that's a not a bad stage to go through if someone listening is new. I wouldn't start with speed bumps and roadblocks. I'd probably start with a pretty open road and take the calls. Maybe start there. It depends on your situation. But if you are looking to generate cash flow quickly and you're good on the phone, and you believe that like once you get someone on the phone, then you're really quick at building trust with people. You're really quick at identifying if it's a good fit. Like a lot of people are just really good on the phone. So if getting people on the phone is a major sort of milestone for you in terms of the sales process, then sure, start off by offering free 15-minute consultations to see if there's a good fit. And then if like you experienced, if it becomes a problem, it's not converting, it's not getting too many tire kickers or whatever, then start to add some friction to the process. So people have to be more engaged. They're going to show up, and it just filters out. It's almost definitely going to filter out a lot of either tire kickers or price buyers who are playing the field and don't consider you to be, particularly differentiated from the next person who does what you do. They're just like up late and like, maybe I'll do this tomorrow and sign up, and then they don't show up. So yeah, add some friction to the process once you have a problem. I wouldn't pre-optimize though, unless you don't need the money and you got 6 months of runway and you don't have to worry about it.
That's great. All great tips. Would love to circle back to something you mentioned around when you're having a sales conversation. You have a prospect that has already self-diagnosed that they need you for something, and you are about to start the conversation. You have this really great framework you share. It's called the why conversation. You mentioned it earlier. Wanted to see if you could, first of all, why the why conversation, so the framework behind it, and why is it so effective?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Credit where credit's due. I learned about this, basically the same concept in Alan Weiss's book, Value-Based Fees. Excellent book. It's from the 80s and is for management consultants. So there's a lot of sort of, maybe gaps in there that you have to figure out how to apply yourself. But it's a really good book. And that's where I first heard about this concept. But it goes by other names too, sort of Socratic questioning and consultative sales. And there's another great book called The Secret of Selling Anything by Harry Brown. And the whole conversation is flipped like 180 degrees from a pitch. I'm so great. I'm so great. I'm so great. Here are all my awesome skills that you can, use to make your business better, or whatever the thing they're trying to achieve. And it can turn into like a beauty contest situation or an order taker type of situation where the client, who's not an expert at what you do, if they were, they wouldn't be talking to you. So they do not have the skills to fill the gap that they are talking to you to fill. So they really shouldn't be dictating what they're going to have you do, right? You're the expert at what you do. Let's say it's, automating workflows for CPAs, and they're an expert at their business. They're an expert at doing taxes or whatever, financial reporting, or dealing with their customers, or what their customers want and what they want in the future. They're an expert of that. You're an expert of the stuff you do. It wouldn't make sense for you to tell them to change something about the way they do business, because that's not what you're there for. And it wouldn't make sense for them to tell you to do your job differently, because they're not the expert. It's like driving the bus from the back seat. It doesn't make sense. So the point of, I think the way to do that interview or that phone call or however you're doing it, is to completely flip around and almost be the prize. Like try to talk them out of hiring you or even someone like you, which sounds crazy. It sounds counterintuitive, because don't you want to close the deal? And the answer is no. What you want to do is find out if this customer is a good fit. You want to find out if you can actually transform them for the better. If you are confident that you can first do no harm, like a doctor, right? So if they're going to give you $10,000, that's a kind of harm that is being done to their business. It's a cut. You've cut them. They are giving you a resource or allocating money to you. They are now worse off. So you need to give them at least $10,000 of value back, hopefully $100,000 of value back, so they keep coming back for more, or they recommend you to their friends. You want to deliver way more value than you took. So in that meeting, and I don't want customers who regret giving me the 10,000 or the 100,000 or whatever. I don't want that. That's not going to be good for me long term, or even in the short term. That'd be a terrible relationship. So you want in that meeting to think like, try and talk them out of doing this. Isn't there a cheaper way you could do this? Couldn't you hire an intern? What about your cousin Vinny? Doesn't he know how to use Zapier? Like, what have you tried? Why is this the solution? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? And you want to bring up every possible objection that you can think of, and for them to swat them all down. And if you write all that down, especially the answers to the question, why not hire an intern? Why not do this overseas? Why not hire an employee to do this for you? Why not repurpose an existing employee? Why do you need an expensive consultant from the outside to do this? If they're a good fit, they will have an answer for that, which you can put directly into your proposal, and they won't argue with it because it came out of their mouth.
Right.
So having this conversation can dramatically increase your close rate. It can dramatically increase the fees that you can charge. But what it does, though, that's maybe not obvious, is it weeds out a lot of people for whom you wouldn't be a good fit, kind of like you're putting a price on the 15-minute call thing. So there are jobs that come in that you maybe could have pitched and landed, and they would have been like, meh, like, okay, yeah, I guess it was fine. I guess it was a success. I guess it was worth the money. And you just don't take those anymore. You just take the ones where you feel like, oh, I think I can hit a home run here, but I'm definitely going to hit at least a double. Like, I'm going to get on base for sure in this situation. So you start to be more discriminating about who you work with, and it creates this virtuous cycle of better clients, higher fees, and then it turns into better testimonials, more referrals, more clients, more better clients, higher fees, right? But it does hinge on your, I don't want to say ability, but more like discipline to say no to clients that aren't an absolute awesome fit. If you've got the financial situation to be able to say no to clients, it's a great way to maintain leverage in the sales interview.
Yeah. And sometimes you kind of have to say yes to that bad client so you can go through the pain to realize what you don't want. It's happened to me. I think last year, just starting out, I said yes to a project that I dramatically priced for way less than what I think it should have been. And it ended up turning out into multiple months of very high maintenance clients. And I felt it kind of in my gut, but because I didn't have the experience, I didn't know what it was or what it wasn't. Mm-hmm. And something my brother says, Hector, who's also like a value pricing, he loves sharing a lot of concepts around it, is that price solves everything. If you have a very difficult high maintenance clients, you just price them up 5 times, 10 times what you would normally price a project, and they'll just go away.
It's true.
When it's not a fit. It's
right.
Like a nice way for you to say we're not a fit. It could be a nice way, but that's I call that the PITA fee, right? The pain in the ass fee. If they're going to be a pain in the ass, then they're going to have to pay for it. But obviously that's not really the intention. There's also some risk of, being perceived as maybe too expensive. So that's more of like a every once in a while, if you really are trying to send a message that you're not a fit and they quite don't understand it.
Yeah. That's an approach that I have used with several students who are trying to transition from hourly to value-based. And they have good clients that they like, but they have just been undercharging them for so long that it would be a dramatic pivot that's hard to describe to them in a way that it's going to make sense. They're going to be like, oh yeah, sure, of course you're worth twice as much as we used to pay you. So an approach that can work there with the scare them away with the price thing is just say, hey, I'm taking my business in a different direction. My prices are going to go way up. And, we've been working together for a long time. I know that's not what you're expecting. I know you don't have the budget for that. So I'm going to introduce you to some people that you can interview to sort of take my place after I leave. And they'll be like, well, wait a second. How much more are your prices going to be? And how is it going to work? If you've been leaving money on the table and they know it, then they might be interested in having this conversation. And in some cases, rare, but some, you can actually pivot them. What usually happens is they say, we're cool. We're all set. We'll talk to your people and we'll transition to someone new. Same concept, but for existing clients, I suppose.
Yeah, especially in the last few years, we've experienced a lot of inflation and price increases have happened everywhere. If you have like a streaming service, you've gotten an email saying our prices are going to go up, Netflix, what have you. But also if you have a service provider of any sort, you're getting letters. And so we know that there is a process or a strategy of how to communicate price increase. And I believe in one of your podcasts, in the Business of Authority, you shared, a couple of tips of how to do that. And so it's a good point. It has to be done strategically with existing customers. So not sure if you wanted to add any comments on how to sell a price increase.
The truth is a lot of people undercharge already. So it is not uncommon at all to announce a price increase at the end of the year, or, you can announce in advance, hey, at the end of the year, prices are going to go up to X. And a lot of times it doesn't turn into the deluge of hate mail in your inbox that you expect. It doesn't turn into everybody heading for the hills. What it can actually do is filter down to your best clients, because the ones that really don't care about the fact that they have you in particular, they just care that they have a CPA. They don't really care who it is. They're not really paying. It's not important to them for whatever reason. They're automatically going to go away because they just don't see the value in it, because they don't value it. So that's fine. But the people who do feel like they would miss you if you were gone are probably like, yeah, that's totally fine. And like, you don't hear a peep from them. And think of the effect that would have on your business. It's like the old joke, I told my barber you should double his prices. And he said, double my prices? I'd lose half my clients. Like, the joke being he'd be making the same money doing half the work, right? So
plus, yeah.
that effect can happen if you are regularly delivering way more value than they're paying for. So you can, air quotes, get away with it without damaging your business too much under those circumstances.
Yeah, and I've read I've read a book. It's called actually Selling the Price Increase by Jeb Blount.
Oh, cool.
Writes a lot of sales books, and some of the concepts that he shares is like a lot of it starts internally, like with the fear of the practitioner thinking, what's the worst thing that can happen? Everyone's going to email me saying, what the heck's wrong with you? And so like it creates anxiety and just unnecessary imagination on what's going to happen. When in reality, if you give it time and you give them enough notice, you let them know, hey, starting next quarter, maybe like 3 months, just to give them some time and space to shop around, or like you said, share some other professionals in the space that could work within their budget. Like if you strategically approach it and also build a business case as to why, and explain the why, then it should be something that should be fair, and it's not going to impact the business. And I did this exercise with one of my former clients who was really undercharging. We took a look at all of her engagements, and we just put a column, current price, what should the new price be? And we kind of put like, how high maintenance is this client, and how many hours does it really take, or how much workload does it take, capacity from you and your team to get this done? And make an evaluation. What should be the impact of the price increase based on a realistic business case? Long story short, she was very anxious of communicating that. After she did it, I think out of, let's say, 50 clients, only 2 of them said, like, oh my gosh, I'm not very happy with this, but they stayed with her anyway.
Yeah, that's been my experience when I hear these stories.
Said, okay.
Yeah, when I hear these stories, that's usually how it goes, where the fear was completely unfounded.
Yeah, it's what it is. A lot of it's we got to convince ourselves in here before we take it into action, and it could be something understandable when you're presented with something that's new and unknown, and this is your living that you're dependent on and your reputation. Again, sometimes it's all internal. I want to finish off our conversation with another concept that is when building authority. I think a lot of solo practitioners struggle with, which is being the everything for everyone, kind of not picking a niche, and what could be the risks of that. So wondering from your point of view, why do folks struggle with picking a niche, and what are some of the benefits of doing it?
Yeah, I mean, Philip Morgan has a great book called The Positioning Manual for Indie Consultants, I think is the name of it. And it describes, he names this positioning fear the positioning fear reflex, or just the fear for short. And he lays out 3 really common objections to it. One is that I'll get bored if I niche down on a vertical or some kind of particular target market, like CPAs or Democrats or whatever. I'll get bored. And okay, that's an objection. I think it's unfounded, but that is the objection. Another one is that there won't be enough of them to support me. So it's like right now I'm taking leads from any business, any kind of business, and I'm only getting like 1 lead per month, which is barely enough to get by. If I niche down on CPAs or whatever, then that will be 1 lead per 6 months. And that is a complete myth. That is the opposite of what actually happens in virtually all cases. There are some exceptions, of course, there always are, but But generally speaking, niching down does the reverse. It gets you more leads, not fewer. Um, and yeah, I mean, those are really the big ones. Those are the really big ones. And so those are fears. They're both, in my opinion, unfounded because, well, the board one is unfounded because every client's different anyway. Even if you're just doing CPAs, you lose a little bit of variety in terms of learning new clients' business models. So like one day you get a CPA, the next day you get a dentist, the next day you get somebody who makes shoes, next day you get somebody that runs a Shopify store. And like, ooh, I get to learn about Shopify, but you're learning on their dime. You're never going to become an expert. You need to prioritize expertise over variety. At some point, not everyone gets there. At some point, people will maybe decide that, like, I would rather walk into these sales interviews, I'd rather walk into these various meetings being able to tell the client what needs to be done. It's the exact opposite of order taking, it's order giving. And you walk in, you're like, let me guess, you've got 10 employees, you're doing about $250,000 revenue per employee per year. So that works out to 2.5 million. You're 55. Yeah. So you're thinking about retirement or what your succession plan is going to be. And you've got all of these thoughts in your head. And like, here I am. So a total stranger, or not me, but whoever, someone like me, total stranger walking in and basically reading this person's most personal information, saying this person's most personal information, like off the top of my head, right? That something Oren Klaff calls a cold read. And it's even better than the why conversation if you can do it, but you really need to know your buyer in order to do this. And if you can do that, that person is going to be like, all I need to know is if I can afford you. Like, you're going to get hired. Like, if I can afford you, how much? Yeah. Where do I sign? So giving up the variety, this sugar high of learning a new business every time you have a new client and understanding their world, their language, where they hang out, where their watering holes are, what their hopes and dreams are, what their business model is like, what their clients want. I mean, to learn all of that every time you get a new client is you getting paid to learn something that you're never going to reapply if you keep jumping from vertical to vertical or niche to niche or whatever. Just any take all comers. You just never really become an expert. I would actually say this is the number one differentiator between a freelancer, which is essentially a freelance, like a mercenary for hire, like, I think that's the source of the word, where you don't really care about what the war is about. I'll just sell my lance I'll fight for the side with the bigger checkbook. I don't care. Right. So that's kind of like the difference between a freelancer and an expert, in my mind, is that they have given up on the sugar high of having a different kind of client every month and are like, no, I really want to get good at helping CPAs. I think if I really knuckle down and I go way down the rabbit hole, I can do a better job for my clients. That's when you start to become an expert. Yeah.
Yeah. And so many great points. And I love that explanation of the difference between a freelancer and an expert. I think it's the effectiveness ratio as well. You're more effective at your job. You're going to do things faster. You're going to have a higher impact. You're going to find the answer way faster for the client. And to your point, like, learning on the customer's dime is unfair. Just to have to learn their business model and figure things out. And the client, most of these days, they want the answers now and they want the result fast, and they're willing to pay a premium for that. I also think that not picking a niche makes it harder for you to be found in the universe, right? You just become another fish in the entire, sea, where if you change the color or the type of fish that you are, rather than being a more generic fish, you're like a very specific type of fish. You're going to be easier to be found and you're going to stand out. And so when I think about going to Google, if I want to search something for something, I'm very specific on what I'm looking for. And I think our clients are so smart nowadays that they are very well trained on knowing what they need to find. And so if you're able to position yourself really well in the marketplace, you're going to be easier to find, which in essence is going to help you grow that demand in your space. So
it allows you to find them, right? So you can be proactive if you did need to be. So I often tell, speaking of fish, I often talk about the sort of metaphor, the objection you'll get if I say like, oh, niche down on a specific kind of buyer, the one that you can help the most, or the one you like the most, the one you really want to help the most. And they'll say, well, why would I just fish with a single hook instead of casting a wide net? And I'm like, that's the wrong metaphor. The tool, the net, is not yours. Nike has a net. Apple has a net. You don't have a net. You have a hook one way or the other. You're not fishing with a net. You're fishing with a hook. You can either fish with a hook in the ocean, or you can fish with a hook in a barrel stocked full of trout. Would you rather be paddling around in a dinghy in the ocean with your one silly, fishing pole? Or would you rather go to this just totally jam-packed barrel of fish? And when you think, and they'll say, well, the barrel only has 1,000 fish and the ocean has like 3 trillion fish. And it's like, yeah, but try and find them, right? The ocean is so huge. The barrel's right there. They're jumping out practically. So it seems counterintuitive that niching down would give you more opportunities. I get that. People tell me all the time, but it's like this paradox of focus. It just, like you said, it allows them to find you. I like flipping the metaphor to that you're like the crazy looking fish, and it makes it easier for them to find you. It works both ways. But yeah, I mean, it's super counterintuitive, but you will not become an expert in a service business without niching down.
What's also interesting, I'll just share more of my personal experience, like not being a sales coach for anything else other than accountants has also attracted people outside of that vertical to say, but do you also do this?
Right.
I'm like, yeah, I mean, I have banking experience. Yeah, I could train bankers how to do business development. Absolutely. And so like all these other interesting opportunities also do arise. So it doesn't close the conversation on everything else.
And
it just makes you interesting.
Yeah, and they're almost apologetic. Like, could you please take our money? Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Jonathan, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really fantastic learning from you and sharing incredible wisdom, experience, and knowledge with my audience. I would love to give you just a couple of minutes to share with the folks that are listening here how they can get to know more about you.
Sure. I mean, my website's the best place. If people are interested in value pricing, which we touched on a little bit here, but there's a lot to it. And if you're a soloist and you want to stay that way, it's something you should really look into. So I would say, go to valuepricingbootcamp.com and it'll redirect you to a page on my site where you can sign up for a free 6-day email course that'll go into how to create leverage by pricing based on value instead of cost. And it's a mind blower for most people, but if you do want to stay solo, it is a really good way to increase your profits.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It was a wonderful conversation, and I will leave more notes in the details for folks to learn more about you. And again, thanks everyone for listening in, and until next time.